Hello, everyone. This is Brian Lape, and we got some information about your health and wellness. So the startling link between sugar and Alzheimer's. This comes from getpocket.com. A hard carb diet and the attendant high blood sugar are associated with cognitive decline. My blood sugar isn't high, I don't think. In recent years, Alzheimer's disease has occasionally been referred to as type 3 diabetes. Interesting. Though that moniker doesn't make much sense. I've never heard it called that. After all, although they share a problem with insulin, type 2 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. Type 1. Type 2 is a chronic disease caused by diet. And this is what most people have. And this is what the obesity epidemic, especially among young teenagers and young people, is causing. And they get off all the sugar, they get rid of the weight, and bam, their pancreas is like, oh my God, I can actually operate. Instead of another type of diabetes, it's increasingly looking like Alzheimer's, another potential side effect of a sugary Western-style diet. In some cases, the path from sugar to Alzheimer's leads through type 2 diabetes, but as a new study and others show, that's not always the case. A longitudinal study, I didn't know that. So I guess this is long-term across years. Okay, there we go. Followed by, so over 5,000 people. So that's actually pretty good. I see lots of times the studies and there'll be like 104 people and the genetic diversity in them is like statistically insignificant. And found that people with high blood sugar and had a faster rate of cognitive decline than those with normal blood sugar, whether or not their blood sugar level technically made them diabetic. In other words, the higher the blood sugar, the faster the cognitive decline. Dementia is one of the most prevalent psychiatric conditions strongly associated with poor quality of later life. My grandmother had this. And she was like maybe 100 pounds overweight. Dementia is not curable, but she also was bipolar and had some other things. Her mother was like in her 40s when she was born, and she was born in the 20s. That wasn't a good thing. Performed her own review of studies connecting diabetes to Alzheimer's in 2016. Okay, so Melissa Schilling, a professor. Okay, sorry. Okay, Melissa. She sought to reconcile two confusing trends. People who had type 2 diabetes are about twice as likely to get Alzheimer's, and people who have diabetes and are treated with insulin are also more likely to get Alzheimer's, suggesting elevated insulin levels play a role in Alzheimer's. Interesting. So, but does that mean that there are type 2 diabetics who are not being treated with insulin? Or I guess it's type 2 who's it's just diet. In other words, in fact, many studies have found that the elevated insulin or hyperinsulinemia, insulinemia, significantly increase the risk of Alzheimer's. On the other hand, people with type 1 diabetes who don't make insulin at all are thought to have higher risk. Are also thought, so how can both be? Well, I don't see how. So they don't make their own insulin, so they have to take it. And type 2, there's type 2 diabetic. I guess there's type 2 diabetics who, it's just, they're being treated, I guess, just with dietary changes, diet and exercise, but some are treated with insulin. Okay. Now, what would be interesting is, and now granted, this is a very, very small percentage of the population, but a lot of bodybuilders the last 15 or so years, maybe a little bit more, have started injecting insulin to actually pump up their internal organs. It's really bizarre, but to make their guts look bigger and their muscles look bigger. I wonder if any of them would also start to show Alzheimer-like symptoms. Schilling, although they are on so many steroids, a lot of them don't live long enough, posits this happens because of the insulin degrading enzyme, product of insulin that breaks down both insulin and amyloid proteins in the brain, the same proteins that clump up and lead to Alzheimer's disease. Okay, wait a minute. If it's breaking down these proteins, and these are the proteins that clump up that lead to it, then you would think that would reduce it. People who don't have enough insulin, like those bodies able to produce insulin, have tapped out by diabetes, are going to make enough of this enzyme to break down. Insulin degrading enzyme, a product of insulin that breaks down. Okay. So they don't have enough insulin, and most likely because it's artificial insulin and not their natural insulin, they're not getting the effects of breaking down these proteins to keep the brain healthy. Meanwhile, and this is what happens when I'm trying to read this too quickly. I know. Otherwise, I end up with like a 40-minute video, and most people are going to listen to me ramble that long. Heck, people don't even listen to me ramble that long when I'm reviewing beer. So, meanwhile, people who use insulin to treat their diabetes end up with a surplus of insulin. Most of this enzyme gets used by breaking up the insulin, leaving not enough enzyme to address those. Okay. So the insulin break degrading enzyme. Okay. So it's too busy. So basically, yeah. So if you have high blood sugar, let's say if you have high blood sugar, maybe you're pre-diabetic, so your pancreas is pumping out a lot of insulin. So this is what's breaking down, I guess, the extra insulin that's being used. Okay, now I understand. According to Schilling, this can happen to even people who don't have diabetes yet, who are in a state of pre-diabetic. Okay, simply means your blood sugar is higher than normal and something that, okay. Now, I will say my triglycerides sometimes are too high. Not high enough to be treated, but this is why I got to get to the gym. I bet you, if this comes down to saying heavy workouts are going to help you, and I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if weightlifting actually comes into this, because weightlifting actually helps you manage your blood sugar better than cardio, and I mean serious weightlifting, where you are. I mean, if you follow me to the gym and you will be beating a sweat for 40 minutes, and you won't. I use 10 minutes of cardio just to warm up my hamstrings so that my back doesn't bother me. That's it. And it's not even serious cardio, just walking. Nearly 1,000 people down into 4 groups. So much of their diet came from carbohydrates. And it doesn't matter if they're complex or simple. Too many carbs is too many carbs. Who ate the most carbs had a 80% higher chance of developing mild cognitive impairment, a pit stop on the way to dementia. And those who ate the smallest amount of carbs, people with mild, this is my low-fat diet for so many years. It has done so many problems. I don't know how my mother got on that kick back in the 80s, but man, I wish I would not have continued. Professor of neurology at Johns Hopkins cautions that the findings on carbs aren't as well established as those on diabetes. Always, because this goes against conventional wisdom, and it doesn't matter that we have decades and decades and decades of evidence, and you could even spout. We have centuries of evidence that say carbs are a problem. In particular, what we have done to a lot of these sources recently, especially wheat. Now, God bless America. This is dietitian speak for it goes against what my degree says. That there's a suggestion that the Mediterranean diet, for example, may be good for brain health. Yeah, but the Mediterranean diet is what? Fresh fish, olive oil. It's a high fat diet, higher than most people want to believe is actually relevant. The Inuits eat fat and protein, and that's it. They don't even know what carbohydrates are, and they have great health of their heart and their brain. But she says there are several theories out there to explain the connection between high blood pressure and dementia. Diabetes can also weaken the blood vessels. Yep, that's true. It increases the likelihood that you'll have mini stroke. I think you're stretching here. High intake of simple sugars can make cells, including those in the brain, insulin resistant, which could use the brain cells to die. There's also a lot of evidence of what carbs do with cancer cells, which is really scary. Meanwhile, eating too much in general can cause obesity. That is not true. The extra fat in obese people releases cytokines and inflammatory proteins that can also contribute to connect. Yep, that is true. Depends what you're overeating. You overeat fat, you're going to have diarrhea. In one study by Gottensheim, obesity doubled a person's risk of having elevated amyloid proteins in their brains later in life. Roberts said that people with type 1 diabetes are mainly only at risk if their insulin is so poorly controlled that they have hypoglycemic episodes. Okay, but even people who don't have any kind of diabetes should watch their blood sugar. I actually have hypoglycemic episodes because of carbs, and I don't think I'm diabetic. Just because and I mean, when I was in high school and running 3 miles a day, you don't have type 2 diabetes. Doesn't mean you can eat. Whoops. Lost my place. Whatever carbs you want, especially if you're not active. Here's the thing, and there are a lot of strength coaches that will talk about this, especially when they get off of the carb train. You need to earn your carbs. Whatever your lifestyle is, I don't care if you can barely walk and you just start walking around the block. Keep track of what your activity is and earn every single gram of carb, whether complex or simple, especially if it's simple. that you get, and you will be amazed at how. Now, granted, if you are used to a high carb diet and you've got to come off that sugar, it is amazing how bad you will feel for like a week or two. But keep pushing. You get your body off of that, it's amazing how you feel. So the study shows by Xi, I guess, is interesting because it also shows an association between pre-diabetics and cognitive decline. As an important point that often gets forgotten in discussions of Alzheimer's. It's such a horrible disease. Okay, yeah, of course. There are genetic, yes, and it's also looked at decisions. Also a slow burning fire that you don't see when it starts. By the time you see signs, it's too late to put out the fire. Yeah, that's true. And my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and my father-in-law has Alzheimer's. But this is an interesting link. It may be more blood sugar levels than just sugar, we'll just say, because some people process sugars differently. And I wonder if leptin is going to play into this, because the brain, the leptin is usually generated when you have enough fat content in your diet. And the low-fat diet is just god-awful for health. Long term. And this is also what can lead people to have what they call carb fits, where there's not enough fat. You get kids who are cranky and you give them peanut butter with no sugar, no added sugar, we'll say, and the fat's in the peanut, and all of a sudden the brain says, hey, we're not hungry anymore, and they settle, and it's amazing. But I wonder if that will play a part in it too, that the brain gets enough leptin and slows down things. What it seems like is if your blood sugar is low and controlled, then these enzymes are going to be beaten up on the proteins that can cause the dementia. But if it's going up and down, like someone with diabetes or blood sugar problems, it can't act. In many ways, this sounds to me one of the best reasons I heard for why diet drinks many times make people fatter. And that's because diet drinks contain a lot of artificial sweeteners, and often, I mean, obviously, not always, but if you're drinking sodas and stuff like that, and if you're drinking that with a meal, let's say a cheeseburger and fries or something, your liver gets so used to processing the chemicals, and it can't process out the sugars and other stuff readily. There's also people who are getting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it would be interesting to see if that also plays in. So those are people who've eaten too much sugar. They don't necessarily have high blood sugar counts, and they're not necessarily pre-diabetic, but their livers are processing way too much sugar, and they basically start to develop liver diseases as if they're alcoholics, even though they don't drink, and many times have never drank. But that's also part of what happens. So the brain metabolizes alcohol, puts it back into sugar, and then the liver then processes the sugar. So that would be an interesting tie-in to this as well that's not mentioned, but maybe in future studies or future maybe get more information, and there may be some more ties into that as well. So there you go. So this has been from I guess I don't know, this is the Atlantic, but the website I'm on is getpocket.com. So what do you think? Do you think this is causality, a correlation without causality? I mean, I don't think they're saying it causes Alzheimer's. But what it looks like, again, it gets back to lack of balance, right? If you have a balanced diet and you have your body chemistry is in balance, in a positive, and especially if it's slightly positive to the more healthy, it is amazing the things that will not develop or will develop much, 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 much later. Imagine, let's say everybody's going to get diabetes. It's not necessarily true. But if you eat right, you don't start to be pre-diabetic till you're 90, as opposed to say 40 or 30 or heaven forbid 15. So that can really play into this. And if the enzymes are being utilized for the blood sugar as opposed to fighting other things that can cause problems with the brain, then I would say it's not necessarily a direct thing, but it definitely speeds it up, we'll say. And sugars also, there's been some things with sugar and cancer cells that are very, very interesting. And it's really coming down to the sugar being so readily available is really bad. Sugar, and especially in the processed sugar we use, is really more of in the last couple hundred years. And for a long time, even in the 20th century, things like gelatin, Jello and stuff like that were, they were treats that you would have on occasion. I can remember when I was growing up, even in the 70s and early 80s, going to McDonald's was a big deal, right? And we'd go every once in a while. Wouldn't go every day, wouldn't go every week, maybe once every couple months. and most of the food we ate was at home. Now, granted, it wasn't, we had a garden when we lived in the 70s in Tennessee, but not always. So the further we get away from that well-cultivated food, and then we've also really messed around with wheat and other things and have caused a lot of allergies because of the genetic alterings that we're doing very, very rapidly, as opposed to, say, over hundreds of thousands of years, where man can adapt to it. And I think that's part of the problem too. So modern life in many ways is really, really bad for health. And it's just, I think this is just yet another example. And I think, so Olga, this is from the Atlantic. So it looks like Olga Kazan. Thank you very much. Thanks for stopping by, and thanks for learning a little bit more about health and wellness and fitness. And let me know what you think. And we will see you. Goodbye. I think this is the last one. All right. 3, 2, and 1. Hello back. What are we calling this? Yeah, I don't know either. All right, 3, 2, 1.